Hello and welcome to the World News Review on Independent Television Abuja. I'm Nkiru Ubuli. Starting off, South Korean president says North Korea's nuclear test site will close in May and will be done publicly. For this and more on the foreign scene, let's join Gabriel Kuma.
The South Korean president's office has said North Korea's nuclear test site will close in May. A spokesperson said the closure of the Punggye-ri site would be done in public and foreign experts from South Korea and the US would be invited to watch. Scientists have said the site may have partially collapsed in September. On Friday, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and South Korea's President Moon Jae-in agreed to work to rid the Korean peninsula of nuclear weapons. Their summit came after months of warlike rhetoric from the North. On Saturday, U.S. President Donald Trump said he would likely hold talks with the North Korean leadership over the next 3 or 4 weeks about the denuclearization of the peninsula. Protesters in Thailand have staged one of the country's biggest demonstrations since the 2014 military coup as they campaign against the luxury houses development in forested land. More than 1,000 people gathered in the northern city of Chiang Mai. They rallied against the housing project being built for judges and officials in the foothills of a sacred mountain. The march went ahead in defiance of a ban on public gathering imposed by the junta, which seized power in 2014. Demonstrators, many wearing green ribbons, demanded the dismantling of new buildings that encroached on the mountain. The forested area contains a popular temple and is considered by some to be sacred. They gave the government 7 days to comply or face more protests. A tree gifted to President Donald Trump by French President Emmanuel Macron has disappeared. The pair planted a sapling taken from the site of the World War I battle in northeast France during Mr. Macron's state visit last week. Mr. Macron said the tree would be a reminder of the ties that bind them. But a router photographer on Saturday took a shot of only a yellow patch of grass on a White House south lawn where the tree once stood. The tree, a European sessile oak, came from the site of the battle in Belleau Wood, which took place in the summer of 2018. Nearly 2,000 U.S. soldiers died in the battle northeast of Paris. Yet, only 4 days after it was planted, the sapling had disappeared. There has been no official reason given for the sapling mystery, but there is speculation online about the tree's fate.
The U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo refused to criticize Israel for killing dozens of unarmed Palestinian protesters during weeks of rallies on Israel-Gaza border as he concluded his diplomatic tour in the Middle East. After stops in Saudi Arabia and Israel, Pompeo headed to Jordan's capital, Amman, where he held talks with Ayman Safadi, Jordan's Minister of Foreign Affairs, on Monday. At a press conference after the meeting, Pompeo was asked if the U.S. took a position on the recent protest at the Gaza-Israel border in which nearly 50 Palestinians were killed by Israeli fire. He said the U.S. believes the Israelis have the right to defend themselves and were fully supportive of that. Pompeo was confirmed as the top U.S. diplomat a week before. And U.S. President Donald Trump suggested Monday that his summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un will be held in the Truce village that straddles the border separating the two Koreas. Trump had previously listed the number of locations under consideration for the historic summit, which will be the first between a sitting U.S. president and a leader of North Korea. But this is his first public comment on a potential site. The Peace House in Panmunjom, the Truce village in the demilitarized zone that separates the two Koreas, was where Kim and South Korean President Moon Jae-in met Friday for a historic summit. Kim, the first North Korea leader to set foot in the South since the 1953 armistice that halted the Korean War, worked with Moon to the Peace House on the southern side of the border for their meeting. Fire engulfed the building site of the new Egyptian Museum in Giza just as twin blasts killed 29 in Afghan's capital, Kabul. For this and more on the foreign news, let's join Tosin Olagunju.
Fire has engulfed the building site of the new Egyptian Museum in Giza. At least 10 fire engines were sent to the scene to extinguish the blaze. The new Grand Egyptian Museum is located near the famed pyramid. It will house some of Egypt's most unique and precious artifacts, including many belonging to the famed boy king Tutankhamun. In January, Egypt placed the ancient statue of one of its most famous pharaohs, Ramses II, in the entrance hall. At least 29 people, including 9 journalists, have been killed and dozens wounded after 2 explosions hit Kabul. The blast went off during rush hour on Monday morning in the Shash Darak area of the Afghan capital. The Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant ISIL, also known as ISIS, group claimed responsibility for the attack. In the first explosion, a motorcycle-riding attacker detonated himself close to the National Directorate of Security, NDS. In the explosion that followed about half an hour later, a second suicide bomber targeted emergency medical workers and journalists who had arrived near the scene of the first blast. The Afghan Journalist Safety Committee reported that 9 journalists who rushed to cover the aftermath of the first explosion were killed in the second blast. South Korea will remove its propaganda broadcasting loudspeakers from the border with North Korea amid diplomatic breakthrough between 2 countries. Seoul's Defense Ministry said Monday that it will remove its frontline loudspeakers on Tuesday and expect Pyongyang to follow the suit. The loudspeakers blasted anti-communist propaganda and K-pop songs since early 2016 after North Korea conducted its 4th nuclear test. The move came after a historic meeting between North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and South Korean President Moon Jae-in last week. It was the first time a member of the Kim dynasty was known to set foot on South Korean soil since the end of the Korean War in 1953. The 2 leaders shook hands and agreed to work together to achieve a nuclear-free Korean peninsula and end the hostilities.
The Kenyan Red Cross says at least 100 people have been killed and 242,000 displaced by 4 weeks of floods, landslides, and heavy rains. The relief organization called it a humanitarian disaster which needs emergency funding. Most of those affected had their homes either swept away or submerged by flood waters. Most victims have had to be resettled in schools, and the organization says they have been overstretched by the crisis. Its Secretary General Abbas Gullet said they are greatly concerned about outbreaks of cholera and other waterborne diseases. Iran has called Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu an infamous liar over allegations he made about a secret Iranian nuclear weapons program. Mr. Netanyahu's revelation split Western powers days before the U.S. is due to decide on whether to withdraw from the 2015 nuclear deal with Iran. France said some of the information had been disclosed in 2002 and stressed the importance of continuing the deal. The U.S., however, said it was proof it had not been built on good faith. U.S. President Donald Trump, who opposes the accord, has until 12 May to decide whether to abandon it or not. Other signatories to the deal, including the UK and France, say Iran had been abiding by it and should be kept. Condemnation poured in across from the world Tuesday after 10 journalists were among dozens killed in attacks in Afghanistan in what the UN described as the deliberate targeting of the media. A double suicide blast in Kabul left 25 people dead, including AFP photographer Shah Marek and 8 other journalists, while a BBC reporter was killed in a separate attack in Eastern Coast province. The second Kabul bomber disguised himself as a journalist and detonated himself among the crowd in what Reporters Without Borders say was the most lethal single attack on the media since the fall of the Taliban. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres said he was outraged by the suicide blasts, which were claimed by the Islamic State group and left about 49 people wounded. 9 people were killed and dozens others wounded in Central African Republic capital Bangui in an attack by unidentified gunmen on a church. For this and more, let's join Gabriel Kuma.
At least 9 people have been killed and dozens others wounded in Central African Republic's capital, Bangui, in an attack by unidentified gunmen in a church. Witnesses said Notre Dame de Fatima Cathedral was attacked with gunfire and grenades during a morning service. French broadcaster reports that a priest was among those killed. It was not clear if all the people taken to hospital were killed in the church. According to the UN, a dozen people were killed in the same church when it was targeted in 2014. A local journalist has tweeted footage of what he says is a mass of people marching down Bangui's Avenue, close to the presidential palace and where the UN is based, calling on the president to bring security to the country. A UN rights expert has expressed grave concern over reports that Myanmar's military has used heavy weapons and conducted area bombing in civilian areas as fighting against ethnic rebels in northern Kachin state has escalated sharply. According to the United Nations, while the world focuses on the plight of Myanmar Rohingya Muslims, a civil war has flared against the Kachin Independence Army, with thousands of civilians displaced from their villages near the Chinese border. The UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Myanmar, Yangi Lee, said the situation in Kachin state is wholly unacceptable and must stop immediately. She said civilians must never be subjected to violence during conflict. The Kachin, who is mostly Christian, have fought for greater autonomy in the predominantly Buddhist nation since 1961. Hundreds of Iranians have defied a ban on protests to mark International Labour Day, with the police detaining at least 6 people. The semi-official INA news agency said the 6 were arrested outside the gates of Parliament on Tuesday when protesters gathered there and at another location in the capital, Tehran. The workers who attended the rally demanded higher wages, better conditions and more protection after retirement. Iranians took to the streets in December and January to protest against economic hardship and corruption, with some protests escalating into calls for the overthrow of the Islamic Republic. Some 25 people were killed in the unrest and more than 5,000 arrested. Iran continues to struggle with high unemployment despite the lifting of international sanctions under the 2015 nuclear deal with world powers.
Iraqi officials say gunmen in 2 speeding cars opened fire on civilians near a town north of Baghdad, killing at least 8 people and wounding 13. Eyewitnesses told the police they saw the gunmen displaying the black flag of the Islamic State group. 2 police officers said Wednesday that the attack happened late the night before in a busy commercial area near Tamia. The town is located about 50 kilometers north of Baghdad. Iraq is heading into parliamentary elections on May 12th, the first bulletin since the government declared IS defeated in Iraq. Despite the defeat, IS militants are still capable of launching deadly assaults. Tens of thousands of supporters of Armenia's protest leader Nikol Pashinyan have responded to his call for civil disobedience, blocking key roads and government buildings. He had led weeks of anti-government protests that forced Sargsyan to resign after 10 years in power. Mr. Pashinyan called for a general strike after ruling party members of parliament refused to back him as interim prime minister. Protests broke out across the capital Yerevan and other main cities. Cars and lorries blocked intersections in the capital, while demonstrators stopped traffic on the route to the main airport. Tourists had to abandon their vehicles and carry their luggage. Metro stations in Yerevan were closed as part of the campaign of disobedience. Special counsel Robert Mueller warned he could order Donald Trump to testify as part of a probe into an alleged Russian election meddling. Mr. Mueller suggested the move during talks with Mr. Trump's lawyers in March. The threat to issue a subpoena, as it is known, was reportedly met with a sharp response from one of Mr. Trump's former lawyers. It is believed to be the first time the special counsel has raised such a possibility. 12 people have been killed and several others injured in Libya's election headquarters when a suicide bomber blew himself up and other armed men stormed the building and set it on fire. For this and more on the foreign news, let's join Gabriel Kuma.
At least 12 people have been killed and several injured in an attack in Libya's Electoral Commission headquarters in the capital, Tripoli. At least one suicide bomber blew himself up, while other armed assailants stormed the building and set it on fire. Voters have been registering for election expected before the end of the year. Libya has been in turmoil since Muammar Gaddafi was ousted in 2011. After his 42-year rule, the country remains under the control of myriad rival armed groups. U.S. media report says Donald Trump's former doctor has said he did not write a 2015 letter declaring the then Republican presidential candidate astonishingly excellent health. Harold Boston told reporters that Mr. Trump dictated whole letter. The White House has not yet commented on the physician's allegation. Mr. Bernstein also said that Mr. Trump's bodyguard had carried out a raid on his offices in February 2017, removing all of Mr. Trump's medical records. It is not clear why Mr. Bernstein is making these allegations now. An Iraqi journalist, Muntaza al-Zaidi, who gained notoriety after hauling his shoes at former U.S. President George W. Bush, says he intends to run for president in his own country. On December 14, 2008, while working for a television channel, threw his shoes at President Bush during a news conference in Baghdad, reportedly shouting in Arabic, "This is a farewell kiss from the Iraqi people, you dog." The journalist was strongly opposed to the presence of U.S. forces in the wake of the invasion of Iraq and overthrow of Saddam Hussein. He received a 3-year jail term and says he remained in prison until September 15, 2009. After prison, al-Zaidi said he went to Lebanon, then Switzerland, then back to Lebanon and returned to Iraq in 2011. When he returned, he said he was put in jail again and stayed there for 3 days. Then he returned to Lebanon. He said he returned to Iraq earlier this year and started his campaign for president a month ago.
The Ministry of Disaster Management and Refugees of Rwanda said at least 183 people were killed and 215 others injured in Rwanda by heavy rains in the first 4 months of 2018. From January 1st to April 30th, the disasters, including flood and lightning, also destroyed a total of 9,974 houses, leaving 706 people homeless, according to the figures released by the ministry on Thursday. Also destroyed were 2,450 hectares of plantation and 21 school structures, according to the figure. The cabinet of Rwanda on Wednesday at a meeting expressed concern and sympathy to all Rwandans, especially families that have lost members and those impacted by the effects of the recent disasters. The meetings also discussed strategies and mechanisms that will continue to support those affected by disasters and to fast-track repairs of damaged properties. Sudan says it is reconsidering its participation in a Saudi-led coalition that has been fighting Iran-backed Shiite rebels in Yemen for more than 3 years. Defense Minister Ali Mohammed Salem was quoted by local media as saying that the benefits and drawbacks of Sudan's participation are under evaluation. He spoke Wednesday before the Sudanese parliament amid call for the troops' withdrawal following reports of mounting casualties among Sudanese troops in Yemen in recent weeks. Sudan is grappling with economic difficulties, including a hard currency shortage. The Saudi-led coalition has been fighting rebels in Yemen known as Houthis since 2015 and a stalemated war that has killed more than 10,000 people. 9 people have been confirmed dead after a military cargo plane crashed in the U.S. state of Georgia. Everyone on board the C-130 plane was killed when it came down beside a highway near an airport in Savannah. Images shared on social media showed the wreckage engulfed in fire and black smoke spewing into the sky. Officials previously said that those on board were on a training flight. The plane crashed shortly after takeoff. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has urged Donald Trump not to work away from an international deal designed to prevent Iran acquiring nuclear weapons. Mr. Guterres said there was a real risk of war if the 2015 agreement was not preserved. Mr. Trump has been a strong critic of the accord in which Iran agreed to limit its nuclear program in return for the lifting of sanctions. The U.S. president has until 12th May to decide whether to stick with the deal. Meanwhile, Iran warned on Thursday that it will quit a landmark nuclear deal with world powers if President Donald Trump pulls the United States out of the accord. Iran has always denied it sought a nuclear weapon, insisting its atomic program was for civilian purposes. Afghanistan's slain journalists were remembered on World Press Freedom Day, Thursday, days after the deadliest attack on the country's media since the fall of the Taliban in 2001. 10 journalists were killed in assaults on Monday, underscoring the dangers faced by the media as the war-torn country slips deeper into violence. Amnesty International's Deputy Director for South Asia, Omar Waresh, said Afghanistan journalists are among the bravest in the world. He said working in some of the most difficult conditions, they have faced threats, intimidation, and violence for simply doing their jobs. The media watchdog said since 2016, it has recorded the killings of 34 journalists in Afghanistan. RSF figures show 50 professional journalists were killed worldwide in 2017, the lowest toll in 14 years. And at least 95 people have died and scores injured in fierce storms that hit the northern Indian states of Uttar Pradesh and Rajasthan. Oluseyi Erenwusi has more on foreign news.
The International Committee of the Red Cross ICRC has said a German nurse working for IT was kidnapped in Somalia's capital, Mogadishu. She was seized by unknown armed men from inside the ICRC compound at 20:00 local time, 17:00 GMT on Wednesday. The 10 remaining international staff are being evacuated to Nairobi until further notice, the ICRC local news. A Somali woman working for the World Health Organization, also in Mogadishu, was shot dead by gunmen on Tuesday. A relative of the woman, identified as Marian Abdullahi, said she was targeted while at a market to buy items in preparation for a wedding next week. There is no suggestion a killing and the abduction are linked. Decades of conflict have made Somalia one of the world's most dangerous countries for aid workers. But security has improved in recent years, and Wednesday's kidnapping is the first involving a foreign worker in almost 10 years. The ICRC's deputy head of delegation for Somalia, Daniel O'Malley, in a statement said, the aid organization is deeply concerned about the safety of our colleagues. Local reports say staff believe the kidnappers took their colleague out through back door, avoiding security guard stationed at the main entrance of the ICRC compound. A police hunt for the nurse is underway. It is not known who is behind the kidnapping. The Swiss-based agency, which has provided humanitarian aid in Somalia for years, has temporarily suspended movement in Mogadishu but said Somali staff would continue ICRC's programs outside the capital. At least 95 people have died and scores more injured in fierce dust storm that hit the northern Indian state of Uttar Pradesh and Rajasthan. The storm on Wednesday disrupted electricity, uprooted trees, destroyed houses, and killed livestock. Many of the dead were sleeping when their houses collapsed after being struck by intense bursts of lightning. Dust storms are common in these parts of India during summer, but loss of life on this scale is unusual. 64 people died in Uttar Pradesh, 43 of them in Agra district, which is home to the Taj Mahal monument. Officials say the death toll could increase. Falling trees and walls killed many people in the state. The state chief minister, Yogi Adityanath, has directed officials to personally monitor relief operations. Relief Commissioner Sanjay Kumar told PTI that the state government has sought a detailed report from the affected district. The state government has also announced that the families of the dead will receive 400,000 rupees, about $6,000, 4,400 euro as compensation. Widow of China's Nobel Peace Prize winner Liu Xiaobo has said she is ready to die in protest at being held under house arrest by Chinese authorities. Liu Xia, 57, has been under house arrest since 2010 after her husband was awarded the Nobel Prize. She was never been charged with any crime. Liu Xiaobo was one of China's foremost pro-democracy campaigners and a fierce critic of the state. He died last year while serving an 11-year jail sentence for subversion. There has been growing concern for Miss Liu since her husband's death. The poet is said to be suffering from depression after spending years under heavy surveillance, and her friend and lawyer say they believe she is being held incommunicado. Journalists have been blocked from visiting her. Advocacy groups have for years called on Beijing to free Liu Xia, but the Chinese authorities insist that she is a free citizen and that the grief induced by her husband's death has prevented her from getting in touch.
And for Foreign News Friday, our correspondent is standing by.
Police on Friday said 4 people were killed in the northern Kenyan town of Mandera, which borders Somalia, in an attack to blame on Islamic group Al-Shabaab. The 4 men, all non-Muslims, who were not from the area, were attacked at a remote quarry on Thursday night, with some of them shot dead and others hacked with a machete. A senior police source on the ground, speaking on condition of anonymity, said a group of more than 10 attackers opened fire indiscriminately at the workers. Local media in Mozambique say Alfonso Dhlakama, the country's main opposition leader who led a rebel group during the civil war that ended in 1992, has died at the age of 65. Dhlakama died in the Gorongosa area of central Sofala province, where he was based amid sporadic violence involving the Renamo opposition group and security forces backed by the ruling Frelimo party in recent years. However, tension eased in 2017 as Dhlakama met President Philippe Nyusi in Gorongosa to discuss disputes between the two sides. The death toll in the dust storm and heavy rainfall that swept through northern India has climbed up to at least 127 as the country's weather agency warns of more weather disturbance in the coming days. At least 73 people have been killed and 91 others injured in the state of Uttar Pradesh. In neighboring Rajasthan state, at least 36 people were killed and over 100 were injured, while 4 others were reportedly killed and 8 injured in Uttarakhand. Some of those who were seriously injured from the collapse of buildings and homes on Wednesday evening died in hospital. India's National Weather Forecasting Center says that thunderstorms accompanied with squall are very likely at isolated places on Friday and Saturday in some cities.
That has been the World News Review on Independent Television Abuja. Many thanks for staying with us. I'm Kiri Obuli. Enjoy the rest of the day.